Hello, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and my channel where I do video reviews of audio gear is pretty young, and I know there have been some audio issues with the videos, such as the sound being mostly in the left channel, and then once I got that figured out, it was pretty quiet. Okay, I have this newer microphone right here that I'm trying for these, and the tricky part is, even though sometimes it will sound great, the videos will sound great here on my own gear, with my own hardware and software, how it translates and sounds on YouTube, I'm finding to be a little bit different. And so I'm still learning how to translate across that. So I appreciate the feedback I've gotten on the audio issues. I am working on that. I have heard you, so please bear with me on that. Now, with that said, let's talk about the Cayin, and I looked up the pronunciation. It is Cayin HA-1A MKII vacuum tube headphone amplifier. Now, I'm not going to hold it up for very long because it's heavy, okay? And so as this channel moves forward, I'm going to have to figure out how to do this with big, heavy amps in a little bit better format too. So it looks really nice, in my opinion, okay? We have two inputs and a pre-out on the back panel. We have this wood paneling on the sides, this brushed aluminum faceplate here, this porthole window where you can look in and see all 5 vacuum tubes, and then this panel on the top where you can pop off part of the chassis here and do some tube rolling if you're into that sort of thing. Okay, this piece retails for about $999 US brand new. It is having some stock issues right now, but if I understand internet chatter correctly, they are going to make a new run of these in the not distant future, and then it should be more widely available. But you can also find it for between $600 and $650 used every now and then, so keep your eyes peeled for that too. Now, before I put it down, again, it's heavy, and I'm already getting tired, and you can probably hear me breathing heavy on that, and it also put a sticker on my shirt. Okay, on the front panel here, you see a volume control potentiometer here. Okay, we have an input selector switch because of the 2 inputs there, but then we also have an output impedance selector switch and 2 headphone outputs that can't be used simultaneously, but they do have slightly different sounds. One of them, the A output, has a more dynamically impactful and lively profile to it, and the other one has a less dynamically lively and impactful, and overall more smooth presentation to it. All right, so I have a video up that I will link to in the description below about what output impedance does to the sound. And so let's talk about why this is here. And I'm going to put this down because it's heavy. All right, so vacuum tube amplifiers, whether they are speaker amps or headphone amps, okay, they work essentially the same way in either respect. They are voltage amplifiers. They have a high voltage output and a low current output. They also have a high output impedance. Now, a high output impedance can be desirable at times, particularly if you have a high impedance load. Like if you are going to drive one of the 250 ohm plus biodynamic headphones or one of the 300 ohm plus Sennheisers or a 300 ohm ZMF or something like that, then the high output impedance on really any tube amp is not only not a problem, it is sometimes desirable. Right? And so that's why some tube amps will be what we call OTL, or output transformerless. Okay, they are meant to be used with one of those high impedance loads, and so that's one way they'll do it. That also keeps costs down, because to build the transformer to put in a tube amp does add cost to the design and the material costs and all of that, because those transformers are hard to get right. What do those transformers do? Well, they bring down the voltage of the output, bring up the current, and then also decrease the output impedance so that the amplifier can more comfortably drive low impedance loads, like low impedance headphones like you get from Focal or the Fostex Biodynamic series in the headphone world, or planars, okay, which are typically, between 25 and 50 ohm impedance usually. There are exceptions, but a lot of them fall in that range. And of course, if it's a speaker amp, speakers are usually 4 or 8 ohms, which is usually low impedance. And so you want to make sure you step down your output voltage, bring up the current a little bit, and then get that output impedance down for those things. Now, the Cayin here, the HA-1A MKII, is transformer coupled, and that transformer has multiple taps on it so that you can select the output impedance that you want to match to your headphones. That does change the sound a little bit. And again, I have that video about output impedance up that I will link to below where you can understand a little bit more about exactly how that works and why that works. So this amp, though, has a set of sonic features that it just does well generally. It has very good bass extension with a fair amount of low-end kick. There's lots of punch and rumble down there, and also very good control in the low end. It has very good timbre. It has pretty good imaging and soundstage. Now, the imaging can get a little bit stretched out of place here and there. Not a bad problem, doesn't show up often, but it does happen every now and then. But typically not a problem, and you usually don't notice it unless you have something else you're listening to and you're switching back and forth. Okay, but it is there at times. All right, and then it also is the treble that is here is very detailed, very, again, good timbre. It's very extended and airy, but it also, the presence is very controlled. Right? It very, very rarely ever goes sibilant or sharp. Even with headphones that are prone to doing that, like the Beyerdynamic DT880 600 ohm that I have, or even more so if you have a DT990 or something like that, that can go very sharp and shrill in the treble very quickly. The 1A Mark II handles that treble and keeps it in check just as well, if not better, than any other amplifier I have heard for $1,000 or less. Like, it is really good in that regard. So you get this set of sonic features that are very solid, regardless of input selector setting or whether you use the lively output or the smoother output. Okay. So then from there, you can customize the sound a fair amount. So you have your choice between the lively dynamics or the smoother dynamics based on output. And then on top of that, you can change the output selection to move the sound, to change it on where it lands on, let's call it the wet-dry spectrum. Okay, what does that mean? You're throwing out audiophile terms, wave theory. Please tell me what they mean. Okay, so a speaker driver vibrates back and forth. Right? Okay. The wavefront that hits you as the speaker driver initially moves towards you on a new sound, like the first pluck of a bass string or something, that initial movement of the speaker driver towards you creates a wavefront which hits your ear. That initial attack is called the attack. Okay? And then what happens after that, about the driver moving away, and then the sounds that follow that initial attack are also part of the decay. Okay, the sound fading away from that initial point there. What the output selector switch is going to do is change the speed and quickness with which that decay happens. It doesn't do much for the attack, but it's the decay, the slowing of the driver after that attack. Okay, damping factor and all of that. The higher the output selector, the higher the output impedance you select, the slower that decay is going to be, and that creates just an overall more smooth, kind of blended together sound, which we call wet. When the decay is very tightly controlled and very quick, you can get a very dry sound. So what this does with the right headphones, most at home still with high impedance dynamics, but you can hear this changing the overall smoothness of the profile on this wet-dry spectrum by driving up that output impedance selector switch. Okay. So you can customize the sound a lot that way, and that really adds a lot of fun and a lot of exploration into this thing. Now, I mentioned that it has that output transformer so that it can be used with low impedance loads. There are some low impedance loads that work well on this. The Audeze LCD2, I have a pre-phaser model, it's over my left shoulder back here, sounds pretty good on this particular tube amp. It does not sound great on all OTL tube amps, for example. Okay. I also tried the Hi-Fi Men Aria. That sounds pretty good on here. The HE-1000 V2, also from Hi-Fi Men. Not my first choice on this amp, but sounds pretty decent still. I did try the Focal Elegia on here when I had one of those. Took a lot of the bite off of the Elegia, but it was listenable. It was a change-up that could work for some people. But then I've also tried other low impedance loads, like even from Hi-Fi Man. The Edition X V2 did not sound particularly good on here. The Audeze LCD 2.4 did not sound particularly good on here. And Fostek's biodynamic headphones, like the TH900 or the TH-TR XOO series, also not great on here. So the ability to change the output impedance does allow you to use some low impedance headphones on here, but it's by no means a magic bullet that works for all of them, so you have to choose carefully. Even so, if you are in the market looking for a tube amp under $1,000, okay, you have a stable of high impedance headphones with you, or you have probably a good rule of thumb is a harder to drive planar, okay, like the Aria, like the LCD2, okay, it's either a little bit higher impedance or very low sensitivity. Then you have a good reason, I think, to take a good look at this amp. So I really like this amp. It's probably my favorite tube amp that I have heard so far. I've not heard a ton, but you can see my written review for the ones that I have heard. So if this whetted your appetite and you want to hear and learn more about my thoughts on this amp, please see my written review, which I will put a link to below. So thanks for listening. This is the Cayin HA-1A MKII vacuum tube headphone amplifier. I am Wave Theory. I have been writing reviews of sound gear for a little over a year and publishing on Hi-Fi Guides Forum and Headphi. And so I will put a link to my review library down below as well. But other than that, if you like what you see on this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, enjoy the music.